You are now listening to Fight Life Unfiltered.
Back in the old room.
Yep, we're back. Got the sign up.
We need to take over, like completely take over. I'm
Yeah,
gonna get an interior decorator to come in here and we're gonna get this thing all polished up. Maybe even put some styrofoam up, make it look like it's
we can give Anthony and Jesse a little puppy corner over there. Yeah.
puppy corner. Well, thank you for joining us.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Got a lot to talk about.
we do.
A
We
lot.
do. Yeah.
Fighter of the year.
Yeah. Yeah, that was
Congratulations.
this week. Yeah, thank you.
I was sitting in
Appreciate it.
Firehouse Subs with my family, kids crying, son sick. My wife's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm listening to a live stream on Instagram to see if Lucas and some of the other guys win an award." But
Yeah, I didn't expect it. I was driving back from Monroeville. I taught classes and I only got the last two awards. Like I only heard the last two. It was Justin for knockout and me for fighter. And it's really cool, it's an honor. 2.5 years ago I was the debuting. Well, yeah. So 2 years ago I was the newcomer of the year, and then I was amateur of the year, and then now I'm pro fighter of the year. So I went, I did all three back to back to back. And I was like the AMI guy that was just coming in. I thought Kama and Justin and all them were like untouchable. And I have a lot of respect for them, and it's really cool to be able to like kind of compete, with them. Kama just would beat the shit out of me right now. So I'm gonna put that out there because I know Justin had some hard feelings, just talking a little shit. But we're friendly competitors, you know what I mean? It's cool. That's kind of how Pittsburgh works. We're all three different gyms. On Saturday, we'll probably all be in the same room. The four people that were going for Pro Fighter of the Year are typically all in the same room on Saturday at noon, which is really, really special. And you can't say that for every city. So I think that's really probably the coolest part of it.
what's been like you've trained a lot of fighters, Will, and obviously there's something special about him. What have you seen over like the last 3 years that really separates Lucas from everybody else?
Bunch of things. I would say first off is good work ethic, just putting in the time. There's no substitute for that. But also it's not just it's not just hard work, obviously. Like I think that's one of those things that gets preached about a lot. Like, oh, with hard work you can achieve anything. And that's absolutely not true. Not everyone can achieve everything. And he has certain talents physically and mentally, but almost, and this is something I've been thinking about a lot recently, like almost the right amount of talent, because I have seen in the past people with like too much talent, not working hard. And he rides that line perfectly. There's also just like a certain it factor that you can't put your finger on, like a mental sort of thing, that, allows him to perform almost above his training levels in fights.
I see that and notice that the most because I'm not around you training as much, but I'm around you. And I'm like, even in this and just conversation, there's some people you want to be around, some people you don't want to be around. There's, you could call it star, the it factor or whatever it is, but you have that and it comes out in everything that I feel like you do. Even your interactions with my son, you know what I mean? Like there's some people are awkward and some people have enough talent that can overcome that and still be a little awkward. But I feel like the right recipe kind of has all of that because it's something to do with your personality and how you see things and how you respond to things.
100%. And not everyone had, like, I was physically, talented enough. I was a good boxer, but like mentally, I didn't compete well. You know what I mean? I didn't have that. And that comes out, I think, too. And like you said, that comes out in like social situations. I'm like kind of
Yeah.
introverted and awkward. That's why I'm a coach and he's the fighter.
Yeah, and that's cool to hear because in my head I'm awkward as shit. You know what I mean? Actually, yesterday when we were hitting pads with T Wood, you probably like felt it too, right? He comes over, he's like, hit the combo, and I was like, fuck, I messed it up twice. And I literally like thought to myself, I was like, you're Lucas. I was like, you got this. Like, I was kind of just kind of had like my ego took over, and I was like, oh, I fucking got this. And then once I started to flow, I was like, there. And sometimes he reminds me of it. You know what I mean? Where it's like, so I get a lot of imposter syndrome sometimes, and I think that's kind of, and it's only going to be more the more I like go into the UFC and stuff. But it's having good people around you that like can boost, like bring you up, right? Boost you up when you need it, and then settle you down when you're being too much. You know what I mean? So, he's definitely that guy for me who's like look at what you've done, and like who you are at times. And sometimes he doesn't even need to say it. Like when I was hitting pads, like he was just like calm me down for a second, then I like hit it. Um, but yeah, man, I don't know. I'm just me. So it's working out. Just
Last
keeps
night was a good
working out.
example too, because like certain people, if they like start messing up, I'm like, that's gonna just like compound and just look worse and worse. And then there you are, one of the great UFC champions watching you, and you're gonna just like start to crumble. But I was like, nah, you got this. And so we
Yeah.
just kept going, and then you started flowing through that pattern, and yeah,
Yeah.
got to show off a little
Yeah,
bit.
it's just like the faith that's like he has in me, Mike and Warren. It gives me like confidence in myself. I've taken fights where um that I've been like, oh, I don't know. And they're like, oh, you got it. And I'm like, okay. You know what I mean? Where it's just like,
Not only the fight, like I'm confident you could get 10-8'd for 2 rounds, and I'd be like, yeah, you're gonna go win this last round. Like you're
yeah,
gonna go get the
when
finish. Like,
just like that, the way he says stuff is just like very matter of fact. And I'm just like, but he also like he sees me every day. He knows how hard I train. Like he sees the ins and outs of everything.
well, and also I'm honest in the other direction too. Like I'm
Yeah.
not gonna say anything publicly right now, but like there's certain things that I'm trying to work on with you where I'm like, you're not good at this, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. I love that too.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think that's just an important part of it, being a coach is being honest.
Being honest. And I think like our age difference is like the perfect um with me and him and Mike, because it's like, like we're friends, we're like friendly, but like there's the mentor part of it, you know what I mean? Where if we were like kind of how you and Mike were, Mike was older than
Mhm.
you, it was like it's kind of like a hard.
Yeah, that was a very strange
Yeah, it's like a
dynamic.
very odd dynamic. It takes somebody special. Like the props to Mike for being able to take that.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I think that works a lot. I just got a special group around me,
Yeah, I really like seeing the dynamic
Mhm.
between you all, and
Yeah.
just there is like I think that adds to the trust level, right? And your ability to be able to kind of like take his guidance, take his calmness, and follow that into situations that otherwise you may not. Because if you don't have that confidence in your coach, them telling you that you're going to be all right might not be what you need to feel confident to go in there and
Mhm.
actually flow and just be yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And it translates to the cage, I think. Obviously, like it translates to life, and that's where we spend most of our time. But when I go into the cage, there's been moments where like Will's taught me techniques the first time he taught me, especially knees.
Mhm.
Like I don't remember if you remember the first time I did a shot killer in practice, I couldn't.
Yeah, no, I remember
Yeah, I
that.
like couldn't do it at all.
I
Um,
was like, how is this kid a D1 athlete?
Yeah. Yeah, I was jumping up in the air. I was like, I don't get it, man. And then like it's kind of my thing now.
Yeah,
And the same with the other knee. The other knee was like, dude, we
that
were
took
walking down
quite some time.
and sometimes I see him like get frustrated. Now that I coach, I'm like, man, I wouldn't be able to do this sometimes with people. And he's very patient too, and it works. Me and him work very, very well together.
Mhm.
Yeah.
How you feeling about this camp?
Great. Yeah, we I got to the film work nice and early this time, which was good. We have, everything dialed in, and we're have a full steam ahead. Everything's going really well.
Yeah. I think this camp's special. It's the hardest I've ever worked in my life. I honestly can say that I get to work with Warren now 3 times a week, which is something that I've never had. I feel like the levels I've jumped from October to now is the biggest levels I've ever jumped in my career. As far as I see it in my striking. I'm excited for it to translate into sparring. I've had a little bit of a weird, past like week and a half. But my grappling, I feel very confident in as well. And like, just jumping levels. And
Mhm.
I feel like after I beat this guy, it's off to the races. And then we'll just continue to get better.
You seem, I don't know if healthier this time around. Seems to be like I don't I don't know. I feel like you may have been dealing with some like nagging, annoying injuries in the past and kind of coming out of this Eddie fight, you had a little bit of time to, I know you went out west, you kind of took some time off for the first time in a while. And hopefully that's not just mentally, but physically kind of gives your body an opportunity to get caught up with itself.
Yeah, and he's the dude that like I'll be like, dude, and he's the dude that will to make me take time off. It's hard. It like I like to be in the gym, not only because like I like to train, but like just for my mental health. You know what I mean? I have to be in the gym.
Mm-hmm.
But I think little nagging injuries here or there, like we'll work around them and stuff. And I had a lot of injuries that happened in my June fight and like just small injuries, but we were working around them. And when we got the Eddie fight, it was kind of like you got to take this fight. You know what I mean? It was like this is a very good opportunity, and like you kind of have to take this, regardless of how you feel. Like I had some injuries a lot of people probably wouldn't have fought with, um, and we took it, got through it. I don't think it was my best performance, but I'm looking forward to like somebody that's going to bring out my best performance. I think the better people I fight, the better I will perform.
I think, and keep me honest here, but am I accurate in the sense that like injuries don't really affect you as much in the competition as much as it does in the preparation?
Depends on the injury.
Depends on the injury.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I think to my much more limited competition experience than you, like I feel like you get the adrenaline going, at least in the moment. Like I'm not worried about my sore knee or my sore shoulder, and it's afterwards, and I might be like, oh fuck, I just fucked that up worse. But it's like I'm dealing with a broken toe right now.
Hmm.
And it's a nightmare because trying to train trying to really do anything is just a
Hmm.
disaster. And so I'm losing the ability to get better. But if you told me right now, like you have to go and compete, I would just suck it up and deal with the fucking pain.
Yeah,
You know what I
yeah.
mean?
Yeah, broken toe is kind of like that where, it sucks when you're training, but like you can probably fight through. I mean, it's good now. So full disclosure, Brody was about to go into that fight that got canceled with a broken toe. And like impacted his training a good bit, but like
Hmm.
it's like what he's gonna win anyways. But then there's other things like a broken nose. Like we can hit pads, we can do a lot of drills with a broken nose, and that's not gonna impact it really at all. But fighting with a broken nose really sucks because that gets touched, and every single time I
Yeah,
start watering, blood's coming out, and it hurts horribly.
that's a good point.
So it kind of depends on what the injury is. And there's also certain injuries where like you hit a threshold. So you're like, oh, my knee's like good. Well, I'm going at, 70%. But as soon as you pass that threshold, then it gives out and like various neurological things. So like, it really depends what it is.
Mm.
But yeah, no, I'm glad that you're a lot healthier now.
Yeah.
And we're getting to that point in your career where like, when I first started training you, you're what, 22, right? It's like, dude, you're made out of rubber. It just doesn't matter, like,
Yeah.
and that's kind of why you're able to progress so quickly because it's just like, it doesn't matter how you feel. It doesn't matter if you're, overtrained, like just let's go. You have to learn so much so fast. And now we're getting to that point, you're in your mid 20s, we got to start to, periodize your training a little bit more intelligently. I mean, you're still young enough that like you get
Yeah.
away with a lot of dumb things, but, we have to start building those good habits now so that, that as your career progresses even more and you continue to get older, we treat your body properly.
Yeah, I agree. And like lifting and stuff like that's I was
Mhm.
just like when I started didn't didn't want to
That hurts my soul.
didn't want to do
Did
it.
you lift a lot in college for wrestling?
Yeah, all the time and I hated it.
Is that why you
And
kind
I think I kind of got like I hated it so much because we would wake up in the morning at 6:30
Yeah.
and lift 3 times a week. And then I would go to class sore, walking on mountains, literally, and then go do practice at 3 o'clock. So I had like that was my introduction to lifting. My
Mhm.
introduction to lifting was you lift as hard as you possibly can and then fuck the rest of your day. All right.
And lose sleep over it
Yeah,
too.
and lose sleep.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Um, but that's how they have to do it in college. You know what I mean? They're limited on time.
Hmm.
Um, and you're 18 to 22, so you can
Yeah, you
recover,
can
right?
live.
So, um, that that was my introduction. And then once I got out, I made a deal with myself. I was like, I ain't getting up before 7 a.m. Right? I was like, it's not fucking happening. I woke up at 5:30 every day for like 4 years. I'm not waking up. And I think that like limited me, especially when I was working a little bit more. And now I'm like, I know, and I've been around like good athletes. I think one of the biggest things is like going to MMA lab and seeing how like those guys moved
Hmm.
and seeing their schedule. That was one of the big things for me because seeing it in person kind of gives you more of a um like real feel about it.
Yeah.
So seeing that and I came back from that thing, wrote a couple notes on my phone. I was like, here's what I need to do to get to the top. And I've just checked it off one by one. And I was like, by January, I want to be full time. I want to be like um, twice a day, 5 days a week, right? That was my coach's philosophy in college. So twice a day, 5 days a week, you become a champion. And I'm there. I train twice a day, 5 days a week. Sunday I train once, and then Friday I'm off. Sometimes I hit pads with him, but it's just kind of like movement stuff. But yeah, I think just like dialing in and being specific, and even the lifting stuff like that.
Hmm.
And as I get more exposure and more opportunities, like I'm going to be able to do more stuff like that, like the recovery stuff, and once I get into the UFC and I have the PI or whatever like
Hmm.
that. So,
Hmm.
just cool stuff just happening.
Yeah, strength and conditioning is really important. I mean, not too important because there are some people who overemphasize it, but going from none to the right amount is really important. But also going from the right amount to the wrong amount, it can be detrimental too. So,
Yeah,
but look, we know what we're doing there.
yeah, we do.
Some real cool pictures of you cracking in front of the tire too.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, I think that's some
Sick.
awesome ones of you like pulling the leg back and he's standing right there like coaching
Dude,
you.
that was such a like cool
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Oh, I could tell like he was just waiting for a time to help me.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? He was watching me hit pads and he was just like sitting there waiting.
It's better than him waiting to get the fuck out of
Yeah,
there.
well, that's at first like I felt a little weird because I was like, I'm like his guy and he was like showing me off kind of, right?
Yeah.
First, this is kind of awkward, right? And then once I started to flow and D Smoke started to ad lib, he was like, "Oh shit!" Well, I was like, "All right, I'm doing good," right? So I felt good, but once T would like once I told him I wrestled at WVU, demeanor was like, "Oh, okay, I'm in." You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Which I think might be because like I don't think I like am a striker, but if you like watch me, you're like, yeah, this guy's a newer pro. You'd be like, he's a striker. But the fact that I also have a college wrestling background, he was probably like, oh shit.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it was really cool. And then he was just fucking helping me, and I was like, damn,
Yeah,
the guy
he
from Cobra Kai.
was giving you some real good stuff from that position.
Mm-hmm. Dude, when he explained it, well, what's funny as fuck is Warren, like the class we did before that, we were working on that position.
Okay.
So it worked out really well. Warren's been big on that position. It's kind of like a supine guard standing over top and being the person that, like throwing punches over top, right?
Hmm.
And it's a hard like spot in fighting. It's also
Mhm.
not like generally talked about because it's not safe to like train really
Mm.
because you're not
Take a
gonna fucking
heel.
up kick somebody in the face, and also the guy standing has such an advantage. And it's really
Mhm.
hard to control a punch that's coming from 5 feet above.
Mhm.
Right. So it's not like a drilled spot. And then we were doing that and he was like, yo, a little pointer. And then the eyes wide thing was what
Mhm.
really was like got me. And I
Yeah.
feel like that's gonna help me just overall and
Yeah, even when you're just standing up, I'm a big proponent of that. Like just
yeah.
you just take more in. I don't
I
know.
used to be more dialed in on that too because Max Holloway. Like I remember listening to the commentators and they were like his eyes are always like wide, right? And that's why he's so accurate. And I just got away from it, I think.
It's one of those things too. I'm not good at coaching because I do that naturally. Like,
Yeah,
and I
that
didn't
makes
even
sense.
realize it until I was sparring with someone and they're like, yo, why are you looking at me like a psycho? I was like, what do you mean? I gotta see what I gotta see, you
What do
know?
you call it where it's um like where you like kind of lull somebody to sleep and then like go and then you what's that called?
I mean, just rhythm changes,
Disposition.
tempo. Oh, yeah,
Disposition.
yeah, yeah.
That's what you're good at. I think
Mhm.
that's what you're naturally good at that if you
Yeah.
saw some like spars. Um but
I was making the guys do that on whatever, some advanced class this week. Because again, it's when I'm good at something naturally, I'm generally not as good at coaching
makes
it.
sense though.
Because yeah, I can't identify what it is that I'm good at with that. And
Mm.
that is one of those things I'm good at. And so I made like the guys at the end of practice, I would like whisper a fighter into their ear and I'd make them shadow box and everyone else would have to guess.
That's
And
cool as
yeah,
fuck.
yeah,
I love that idea.
yeah.
When do you do that?
I mean, again, that's just one of those things. Like I've done that with like Mike sometimes, just playing around. I'm like, yeah, who's this? And like, it's fun. But then I realized like not everyone can do that. And then I started making them like identify, like, how did you know that it was this guy? You know what I mean? And they'll be like, oh, well, like his stance. I'm like, be specific. Everyone's in a stance. Like, what does that mean? What variables make up a stance? What can we change in a stance? And then they have to start thinking about like, oh, am I front foot heavy? Am I back foot heavy? Am I fairly balanced? Is my torso upright? Am I leaned over? What's my hand position look like? Is it Philly shell? Is my left hand higher? Like all these little things. Like that's how like I could shadow box Conor McGregor and you'd be like, oh, that's him. You
Do
know what I
you
mean?
take it a step further and ask them then, like, okay, so it means Philly shell. Why is he doing that?
Yeah, I do a
Because
lot of
then you know what I mean?
that.
Because then you can kind of almost take it to the
Mhm.
next layer. It's like, okay, Sean Strickland, why does he do that? Okay, now let's look at them. What does that mean for him?
Mhm.
And when you look at his fights.
That's something that we go over from fundamentals up through advanced classes is what are the pros and cons of every technique?
Yeah.
Why do we use this? Why, there's certain positions we can use certain techniques from that we can't from other positions. I want everyone to know all of that stuff because that's really important for developing their style.
Mm.
And that's something I really try to make happen is I don't want them to just be like versions of me. I want them to, be themselves and fight using the techniques and strategies that work best for their body types, their disposition, everything,
Mhm.
I want to give them all the skills to make that happen.
I think like body type, like grappling level is also important,
That's
right?
huge.
And I also think, and this is kind of like a kind of unique thought, is like if you are into like you know what I mean? Like I think sometimes you have to like have somebody that's like, all right, I'm gonna show you a cool move to keep you interested, right? Or keep you like I want to fight like a certain person because that's who I look up to. And it just keeps you interested in the sport rather than, all right, you're just going to come in, you're going to hit 1, 2, slip, 1, 2, slip, roll, right? And you get kind of get somebody interested in the sport, kind of why they got interested in it. And then you start to kind of meat and potatoes from
Mhm.
there rather than meat and potatoes from the beginning. And a lot of people just lose interest. They're like, this is fucking boring, bro. And also,
Yeah.
like, look how far I have to go to learn all this stuff right? I think that's cool for me because I teach the fundamentals curriculum, and every once in a while at the end of class, because I see them sometimes get bored, right? Especially the people that have gone through it a bunch.
Hmm.
Be like, all right, here's fucking, we're doing the hand trap elbows, here's spinning elbow. And they're like,
Hmm.
oh, this is cool. I'm learning something. John Jones hit this. You know what I mean? And it sparks their interest because they showed up for a reason. It's because
Mhm.
they like MMA. Most people is why, right? They want to learn self-defense, for some people, but a lot of people it's just like they love the sport. So if you're like, hey, um, uh, Alex Pereira fought this weekend. Here's what he did, and here's how we can relate it to our attacks today,
Mhm.
Hmm.
right? And that can really spark people's interest. Yeah, I think that's something
And
to
it's
keep in
it's a
mind.
balance you have to have because like I do think that the correct way to learn things is the meat and potatoes, the
Yeah,
basics. I mean, that's kind of how our curriculum's set up on the striking side, at least, is fundamentals is technique, and everyone learns the same technique. And then intermediate is concepts. How do we apply those techniques? How do we break certain rules? How do we set those techniques up? We go more in depth on defense, things like that. And then advanced is what I talked about before, developing your own style. So again, blending those concepts in ways that make sense for you. But with that said, I used to have like a footwork lesson in the fundamentals curriculum. And what do you know? People who, are there day one and want to look cool, doing MMA stuff, they don't want to just like do box drills and step around.
Hmm.
So you kind of have to like blend that. And I think we're starting to do a good job of that with fundamentals. Like our fundamentals knee lesson, for example, we have,
Flying knees. Yeah.
very cool flying knees and there's variations within that too. So like you said, if I see a class, I'm like, everybody here has been here for months. I'll teach a different style flying knee than what's in the curriculum because it
Hmm.
all fits together.
Yeah, I'm starting to get to the point where I've taught for probably a year and a half now. So I'm starting to get familiar and I got my timing down and when to do stuff. And I can look around in the class, kind of see when everybody's doing it. I think once I'm done fighting, like far out done fighting, I'm gonna be a good coach. Like it's something I look forward to doing. And like basically because of him and Mike, is like I just like I'm gonna be way better at coaching them because I had them. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? So that's just something I look forward at and just seeing like the dynamics of I think personalities is big too, especially with coaching
Mhm.
athletes. One of the things he like got me from the beginning was the first time I met him, he's like, "Can you shadow box for me?" And I like shadow boxed. And then he was like, I think he could tell that like I liked like Sean O'Malley and Dominic Cruz and like people that moved a lot. He's like, I see what you're trying to do. And then he from there was like he was like, I'm gonna make you Sean O'Malley with wrestling. Right. And then
Like
it was
fill the
like,
space
yeah,
that
he
might
was
be
like,
missing from
hey,
what you're
Also organize
understanding.
the things because like
yeah,
it's easy to if you don't have that fundamental level of basics and meat and potatoes, but you're still kind of athletic, it's easy to do what we were talking about earlier and like shadow box like somebody. But if you don't know what you're doing, it's not going to be
yeah.
technically accurate in the ways that you want it to be. And you might not know why yet. So that's kind of what I think I was trying to point out to you, which I like vaguely remember that first day.
Yeah, it was
Uh,
really weird
It's like you
day.
need to throw a jab in this spot because
it's mostly footwork. Cleaning
you
up
did a lot of
footwork is,
footwork.
yeah, that's huge. Because like if someone doesn't really know what they're doing or what they're looking at, you can go and like imitate, I don't know, Dominic Cruz, and people be like, "Oh yeah, that's cool," and you're like, "That's not actually good," you know.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, no, from what I remember, I was just like, "Yeah, we'll clean up X, Y, and Z," and
yeah.
talked about some conceptual things, which in the moment, if I remember correctly, I think I thought it kind of like went in one ear and out the other because you were like, what? And then in
That's
hindsight,
my
you were like,
face.
yeah, you were
It's my
like,
learning face.
you're like, no, that was like
Oh, dude, he got me that day.
influential.
I was gonna go to Matt. I was supposed to go to a different gym because I moved to Cranberry and I
Yeah.
was like it's like equal distance, right? And I didn't want to go. I didn't go to Zealy. I went to Zealy like once or twice, and I went. Him, Mike, and Warren just happened to be there having like a meeting, and I'm walking in. I show up late because which is hilarious because I'm not late to anything, right? And but I was picking up this kid who's habitually late to stuff. Right. And I was late, like 15 minutes late, and Will didn't have a class he was supposed to, and it was
Oh,
on the
that's right. It was
schedule.
a noon
And
class. You know that
I
shit.
showed up at 12:15 and I was fucking pissed. I was so mad at Ryan Sullivan because I showed up late and I don't like being late. And then I was like, damn, these people are gonna think I'm lazy and I'm late and this and that. And then Will's like, all right, well, I'll help you out because you're a wrestler, whatever. He's like, shadow box. And then Will kind of like just shit on me. And I was like, I like this. The way he was like breaking stuff down, I could tell like how intelligent he was and he was using big words and he woed me. And I was like, fuck yeah. I was like, I need this guy. And then that's really what got me signed up at the gym was me showing up and him just like overloading me almost.
Think about it though, because the opposite would have been your ego would have been hurt and you would have decided to go somewhere where somebody tells you what you want to hear. And where would you be right now? Right? Like
Yeah.
maybe you'd be in the same spot. I don't, but I
Yeah.
think that speaks to what we talked about earlier, like the
It
one of the
factor. Hmm.
attributes that you have a strong ego, right? You have a healthy ego to think you're a winner, to go out and be like, I'm the best, but not so healthy that you're not willing to take somebody's feedback, even though you were a Division 1 wrestler and you could have been like, fuck this guy. Like
Yeah.
I'm fucking good. I'm tough, right? Like I can do this.
Yeah, I think just like learning from anybody, you know what I mean? You can learn anything from somebody. That's something I've carried my whole life, and my dad like instilled in me.
I think you can learn something from anyone.
See, he's good at like helping me when I say stuff.
Well, I
He's
know what
very
you meant, but it's
literature.
just like
Yeah, you can learn anything from.
no.
No, yeah,
You
you can
can't
learn
learn
from.
anything
Hey, whatever. All
from
right. See, he's good. I'm gonna keep him around
it's
too.
semantics.
I'm gonna keep him around for, when I fuck up words too. I'll be like, all right, Lucas, we need to have a talk about how to
Mhm.
speak. All right, we're gonna develop that over the next before I get to
All
the
these players need to
UFC.
be
Yeah.
reading.
Yeah, not a big reader. But yeah, I think just like being able to learn stuff from anybody that's around and like I could have been like, oh, Will didn't fight. Like, fuck him. Right? I want somebody to fought. But like in reality, like the way he relays information. And I also like look at NFL coaches that are the best. I don't know. I mean, you're just starting to get the wave of people that fought or people that played football, but most of the best coaches have always been analytical guys. That's how their brain works. They weren't great athletes. And I think if you were to ask me, and it's kind of depends, but if you were to ask me if I want a coach that was like a state champion or a state runner up, probably want state runner up because he's gonna do everything to ensure that you don't do what he did. You know what I mean? And that's kind of always been my thought process on
Yeah,
coaching
well,
too.
to your point earlier, right? The things that you're really great at, you're usually not great at teaching. Michael Jordan, not
Yeah.
Wasn't a good coach. Yeah,
probably
probably
wouldn't be a
wouldn't be
good
a good
coach,
coach.
but
Yeah.
like I got to be very difficult being the best and kind of looking at somebody else being like, this is just fucking do it. It's
That's the thing about the talent too. If you're supremely talented, you don't always know, like I said, how to explain it or, have the patience to develop it. And so if you're someone who, like, the only reason I was remotely okay at boxing was because I had to understand how it worked and I had to, develop strategies and think my way through it. So yeah, a lot of times kind of what you said is like the best guy might not make the best coach. With that said, there are definitely exceptions. There are
Yeah.
some people who are really, really good and really, really smart, and probably have the correct, you know, emotional intelligence to convey that information. But yeah, I would say like speaking in generalities, the people who are really, really, really talented, in my experience, don't always make the best coaches.
who do you look to as a coach, right? Like I know
I
Lucas and I
love
have
that
talked a
question.
lot about like he really looks to Corey Sandhagen, Sean O'Malley. Do you have anybody that you look to as like a guiding pillar from a coach?
Yes, I guess is the short answer. I mean, there's certainly coaches within combat sports that I draw inspiration from. I think that Danaher does a really good job of systematizing things, and
Hmm.
that's something that I'm really proud of in how I teach striking is that it's systematized and it's not fighting is inherently chaotic, and so something I think I'm good at is pulling out the variables that we were discussing around the strikes earlier, and like or stances or whatever, and systematizing that in ways that then I can chunk that information up and give it to them in the correct order, in the correct way. And so, Danaher in some ways has been, kind of influential in those sorts of respects. I think that when you listen to anyone who's good at anything really. So like one of the things Lucas has been listening to me ramble on about for the past however long is like drummers, right? So like the way that they convey that information is really refined, right? Like how
Hmm.
much has how much has music been refined since like the inception of music? Like a ton, right? Like they went from probably not being able to identify notes to them being like, oh, well, this note is higher and this is lower, and then like creating rudimentary instruments and singing and things like that through, learning to write music. And that evolution, I don't think we've seen in stand-up martial arts specifically. I think that jiu-jitsu has seen a very big evolution over the last I don't know, whatever we want to call it, 30, 40 years. Whereas striking, I think, has been relatively similar over the past, couple hundred. And like that's an oversimplification. There's obviously modern MMA striking, whatever, that actually means. But anyways, yeah. So to get back to it, like I'll draw a lot of inspiration for how musicians will discuss what they're doing, how they explain it. And especially in striking, like being able to explain how various rhythms work, or like you were talking about earlier, dispositions. Like I could have you listen to a song and you're just like, oh, this groove. Like if I told everyone to go shadowbox to a song, it's probably going to be relatively similar because like that music is making you move in a certain way. If I put a different song on, you're going to shadow box differently. And being able to create that on your own is really important. And I have to have the correct language to make that happen. So, I'll draw inspiration from musicians, from other coaches, from coaches in different sports. And again, the specificity of how they talk about their sport is really, really important to me. I think that just training techniques or just training like, hey, we're going to do this combo. It's like, there's no context there. You know what I mean? So the short answer is yes, there are coaches who inspire me, but also I would say no, because I think my coaching style is kind of developed through like many influences outside of like just coaches.
Is it an example of once you know the way broadly, you see it in all things?
I would say Musashi is a huge
Yeah.
influence on my coaching. When I was like, I don't know, 14 or whatever, huge martial arts nerd, reading the Book of Five Rings, lots of inspiration from that. Yeah.
It's kind of what I was thinking is I think learning and kind of like taking stuff like if I was like, hey, I really like Michael Jordan, right? Opposed to I'm a huge fan of John Jones, right? If I'm gonna be a huge fan of John Jones, I'm gonna try to emulate stuff that he does, and it might not work for me, or it might work for me because I'm built similar, but like somebody that's not, right? But where if I'm like I like Michael Jordan, kind of hit the way he looks at things, and it gives you your own creative way to kind of expand throughout, right?
So how do I convert that into MMA
and make it myself? You know what I mean? And not trying to like knock what somebody else, like be somebody else, right? You're not trying to be somebody else. You're trying to become yourself. And I think finding inspiration and stuff outside of a sport or outside of something specific, like I think that can kind of like give a more like creative way to do things.
You get to steal like other people's ways of thinking. You know
Yes.
what I mean? And you can apply that to anything,
Yeah.
once you know the way broadly, so you can again like take how Jordan thinks about various things and apply that to your sport. And you also can reject parts of it too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you don't have to apply everything that they do, but again, that's MMA. That's
My mind is always an analogy. That's how I think about anything. And that was it probably happened over a longer period of time than I realized. But to me, there was a moment in time where it was kind of like, oh, like I can't not look at everything and see a guy who's, a master at woodworking and be like, oh, like I see how that translates into me podcasting.
Yes. Yeah.
It's like you pick up the underlying principles of how they're successful and you realize that it's like malleable. And you're like, oh, I can take the like costume off and the scaffolding of it. It's all the same.
Exactly.
And then like
constantly sending you drum videos.
Yeah, he's messing me with something.
Oh yeah,
Sometimes I get it,
especially when you're talking music. When you were saying that about how you like look at it, obviously you guys know this, but like big into music. So like for me, same thing. Like there's and it's because you can get so granular with. I play the guitar, so it's like there's 1,000 ways you can kind of do the same thing, and to an untrained ear, it's just like, oh, that's that song. But it's like, no, what you're missing is he's finger picking that.
Yep.
Or it's a downstroke. It's, or he's not putting as much pressure on the third note while he's, positioning his hands, or there's so many different ways. And then you start to understand kind of the same little details that are in that for striking or bagging groceries. I mean, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
How you can organize your mind.
And I think that drums and striking in particular are like, they are right next to each other. You know what I mean? And like, maybe it's just because I grew up playing drums and I'm also really into striking, so I see it. But like, it's the same thing. You're hitting things you have various targets. You have to hit the correct space, right? So like if you hit the wrong part of a drum head, it's not going to sound good. If you hit the wrong part of someone's face, you're not going to get the desired result. And then you have different targets, right? So, maybe I'm hitting a floor tom that's going to someone's body, you know what I mean? Maybe hitting a cymbal is the equivalent of you fainting. It's like, it's literally the same thing. And then being able to manipulate and create rhythm. And again, like you said, in different ways. So do you remember that video that I posted of, it was Sean O'Malley hitting a combination that flowed directly into the drummer from Slaughter to Prevail playing a blast beat. Do you remember I posted a video like that?
I think so, man.
I did. I just saw that so clearly. I was like, "But that's the same thing. That's so cool." And then like no one else really picked up on it. And what was interesting is the way he played the blast beat. So a blast beat is just it's polka. It's right like this, da, da, right. It's literally polka, but then it's just really fast, right? And so that's death metal, right?
The fact that you said a Slaughter to Prevail blast beat, that's
but so he's playing it with one hand, right? And so most of the time your left hand's playing the snare drum, your right hand's playing cymbals. But in the middle of it, he switches and his right hand is playing the snare and then his left hand starts playing the cymbals. And the reason I posted that O'Malley combination is because he hit something that we have a code for where he switches stances and it's very seamless. And so this dude went from playing left-handed to right-handed very seamlessly. And I was like, that is literally the same thing. Like, and the rhythm didn't change, nothing. Like it was the same thing. The target didn't change.
I think it's so interesting how, everybody's brain works because like that's something that like I'm starting to understand now. You know what I mean? With you kind of explaining it, but that's how your brain has always worked. You're like, oh, drums and striking are the same thing. And in my head, when he started saying that, I was like, the fuck is he talking about? Right? And he hits me with these big words that just go over my head, and then I check out. Right? But the way he just dumbed it down, I think I get it.
But the crazy thing is it even goes from physical form to mental form. Like I see this because I got, heavy into business. The way that you can do something physically isn't just limited to other things physical. I see the parallels between that and how I approach negotiating. I see it in how I approach my relationship with my wife. My wife probably hates it, but I'm like, no. And I'm constant. She's like, you're just a walking analogy constantly. I'm like, it's kind of like this. And she's like, I don't.
Yeah.
Sometimes she gets it. Other times she's like, I don't understand where you're like, what the fuck does that have anything to do with what we're talking about? And I'm like, oh my God, it's like so crystal clear to me. Like if you could understand that, then you would understand where I'm coming from here. But that's beautiful to me. And I think that's just the evolution of understanding.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. Very like unique how people's brains work and how I think successful people, like at the end of the day, it's like they figure out how to get where like you can have whatever circumstance and at the end of the day it's just like work hard, find what works for you, and if you want it enough you'll figure it the fuck out. And for most people, but obviously some people start in third base and some people start way behind, and
some people get lucky, some people don't.
People
do the wrong thing and get the right result. You know what I mean? Like life is crazy like that.
Yeah, for sure. But I think for the most part, right? If you were to like generalize it, right? If I'm going to tell somebody from day one, I'll be like, work hard, figure it out on your own. And that's how you become successful.
It's prereq.
Yeah. But I think everybody's got like their own unique ways of looking at things and being able to like decipher how to talk to somebody like a certain athlete, right? I think a coach with athlete relationship special, especially somebody like him, right? Like he talks to me different than he talks to Brody, and he talks to Brody different than he talks to Max or whoever, right? And he has ways to like convey things to each fighter, right? And then some things go over all of our heads like drums.
Well, but I think that goes to your being able to see the variance in life, like that's that intangible that you have, right? To understand, to see an output, which is his personality, how you see him move, and to be able to say, okay, I have the plug to plug in here, and I'm not going to try to put a 3-prong plug into a 2-prong outlet.
Yeah, and
I've got to get an adapter here.
That almost gives me too much credit though, because yes, but also like and that's kind of what I do with our curriculum is like I show you everything and then I get to see what sticks, you know? So like I wish I could say that like I can look at him and be like, oh, he's a two-prong outlet. Let me give you the two-prong. But it's more like, hey, let me just throw a bunch of plugs at you and we'll see what starts sticking. And then I'm like, oh, cool. Well, now we got the plug. So now we can start to add on to it. Now we can build some wires out. And then we can from there make it more complex and build out that tree. So again, that's why I think it's important to expose all my fighters to a bunch of different techniques, a bunch of different styles, so that again they can start to like grab onto the things that work for them. Because if everyone fought like me, they would just like jab and run away, move their head, play it safe, you know, like that's not for everyone, you know what I mean? And especially we have similar body types, but you know, I was like a very mediocre city league wrestler and he's a D1 wrestler. So like that's very different. And that's what's really cool about working with like people who have great grappling is that I'm not limited at all. You know,
I was
it's
just
like
gonna say, do you feel like you kind of get to through other people be like, man, if I had the wrestling, I would have done this.
for sure. Well, I mean, I wouldn't have done anything because I never fought MMA, like you said. You know, I've boxed, I've fought Muay Thai, I've wrestled, I've done
Sure.
jiu-jitsu, but never all together. But yeah, no, it's like if someone was built like him but couldn't wrestle, we would probably have to develop different styles because I'm like, hey, these kind of put us in goofy positions. Whereas now I'm like, oh, if someone gets a single leg on you, great.
Do you know
Like
what this
this.
reminds me of? And this goes to my analogy, not to cut you off, but like, do you ever play basketball on a lowered hoop?
Oh yeah.
So like, if I was 7 foot tall, like I know, like I could do all this stuff. I had these. I was like, I would have been in the NBA, and I would have fucking fucked Shaq up because I have this awesome like drop down.
Yeah.
It's just so many different things, but it's because but it's not real. You know what I mean?
But the lowered hoop is a great analogy because there's so many things we can do within fighting that are exactly that. It's a lowered hoop, right?
Yeah.
So, easy example, if we train all of striking, it's really complex. We have kicks and we have so many different ranges and so many different things and variables that we have to manipulate. Whereas if I go, hey, today we're just going to box, that's a lowered hoop, right? We've limited the variables or changed the parameters of the game. And so now we can focus on boxing or in this case dunking or you know whatever it might be. And so again, changing the parameters of the game is a really important way to develop and a really important way to think about things differently because again, really cool intricate like Pernell Whitaker style boxing defense wouldn't exist if everyone only fought left way. You know what I mean? I mean, there's just so many examples of that within combat sports. All the intricate leg lock systems that people are using now would not exist if there wasn't sport jiu-jitsu. If it was just MMA, one dude would have dropped on a leg lock, gotten knocked out, and been like, yeah, we should chill on this a little bit, you know? So like having parameters kind of counterintuitively increases creativity in a lot of ways.
That's interesting. What's it called? The Mike's doing the big block on eco training,
Ecological training.
right? So that's kind of the same. What you just said, like
Yes.
if you're like MMA, all right, we're just focusing on boxing.
Constraint
You can't
based.
kick. You can't kick, right? And for somebody that's a kicker, you're like, man, fuck this. I don't want to do this. But a lot of times we do shoulder touch and it's like a low kick or it's round kicks and stuff. I'm like, man, fuck this, right? And I think it makes you better because you're focusing on one specific thing.
It was crazy. 2 weeks ago we did it was like you got to keep a back connection. You can't put your hooks in now, and you've got to just basically, no locking your hands and try to figure it out. And then, I mean, it was a disaster. The person on bottom just kept getting up, and then he was like, "Okay, let me show you one thing that you could possibly do here, but you're still not allowed to put your hooks in." And we did that for we just kept going 2 to 3 minute rounds back and forth.
Add a different variable.
New little variable. And then the last 5 or 10 minutes of class, he's like, okay, now you're allowed to choke people out. You're allowed to take their back and choke them. And the person who had back control or top turtle were like fucking up the person who for the first 50 minutes just kept getting up. And you're like, oh, wow, I just learned so many things in a constrained environment that I can now use when I don't have those constraints.
With that said, and I think that this is a really important thing to talk about because in combat sports, this is like really prevalent. The ecological training thing, like there's this big debate, which does not make sense to me. And they're debating these two methods, right? Drilling versus ecological training. And it is so dumb because it's not about those methods. It's about the people who are doing that argument, like making those arguments. It's about their lack of ability to think properly? The correct answer is both. Obviously, right? Like anyone who's like not a complete moron knows that. Like obviously we need to drill so that you know what the techniques are, and then obviously you need to do them, live and all the varying degrees of chaos and restraints, through that to find out if they work. And obviously you have to put constraints on to dial in those specific techniques. You just do both of those things. And the fact that people think in absolutes like that is just so mind-numbing.
Did you watch the debate with
No.
Big Dan and Greg?
No, I'm not going to waste my time on
It was
that.
the most frustrating thing
Yeah, you
because
told me about
they
that.
both had great points. And I'm like, how can't you figure out that this is both? Greg Sutter would make these points, and I'm like, wow, he's really making a point for the ecological training method. And then he would turn and say, no, drilling it's never about drilling. You just don't understand how you're getting better. And it has nothing to do with drilling. And I'm like, you've just discredited everything that you said because now I can't take you serious.
It's just like it's such a dumb argument because they're not mutually exclusive. It's like arguing over, I don't know, like
I think the way I look at it, it's like how to train MMA. It would be like, all right, you're only going to box, you're going to kickbox, you're going to do jiu-jitsu, you're going to wrestle. You're never going to do it together, right? Or somebody that's like, hey, you're only going to train MMA. You're never going to
Right.
specialize,
Good point.
right? So that's kind of how I viewed it, and
it's the same thing.
Yeah, it's very
but
similar.
it's not even just like that's a one-to-one analogy right there. It's the sensationalized thinking that people have in combat sports. Easy example of that, calf kicks, right? Like everyone hears, the UFC announcers like, oh, calf kicks are like impossible to defend against, and they're like so overpowered and blah blah blah. Calf kicks are great; they have their place, but they are overrated. It doesn't mean they're not good. It just means they're overrated. It means the entire MMA community now. Like I heard, like Joe Rogan on some UFC recently was like, oh, I can't believe that guy's still kicking above the knee. I was like, what do you mean, dude? That's a time-tested, awesome technique that works beautifully. And there's reasons why you might want to do that as opposed to kicking the calf. Maybe you're having troubles creating the angles you need. Maybe the guy's starting to figure out your timing. Maybe you kick the calf a bunch and now you're trying to hit a different target. Like acting like that is like the end all be all, or like that you can't defend it, or it just treating it as something that it's not. It's that sensationalized thinking that we get through martial arts all the time, and like, I mean, that's just kind of how pendulums swing a little too far one way or the other. And like, jujitsu guys start winning the early UFCs and everyone's like, jujitsu is where it's at. And then as soon as people start to learn a little bit of take or, submission defense, then it's, oh, wrestlers are dominating. And then some strikers learn to sprawl and they're like, oh, well, now you have to be a K1 champion. And it's like, no, dude, like all these things aren't mutually exclusive. Like you need to just like learn to think about it properly. And again, don't over sensationalize any one technique or any one style or anything. It's just draw from that and apply it to your game.
I think that's my favorite thing about not only MMA, but all sports, right? Like if you look at football, right? Like when you looked at like early football, it was like 3 yards and cloud of dust, right? We're running down the middle every time. Right. And then you started to get spread offenses and people are slinging it out but it all depended on like really who your athletes are.
Yeah.
Right. And then now you got such a variable way. And then it just like when Michigan won, it was like, oh, they went back to 4 yards and a cloud of dust. And it's like, it just whatever works for you, kind of.
Let's
right?
even back to music, the same thing. Like it's why music or fashion, everything kind of always comes back full circle. Nothing ever really veers too far away. And you realize like, oh, wait, no, there's still a place for you. And in a way, maybe you need the sensationalization of calf kicks in order to get it kind of trained, everybody, and then it kind of resets back in and now it becomes a part of the broader program, right?
Yeah, but honestly, I'd prefer it doesn't, because then that's an advantage for us. Like we train a lot of clinch. Our MMA fighters train a bunch of clinch. Most MMA fighters don't. If you watch our guys from amateurs up through pros, when they clinch up, they're just better than their opponents. And it's just because we know what we're doing and we spend time there, So like, I kind of wish people didn't do that, because then we can, develop our own style. But also it's cool that they do, because like, we know that people are going to throw calf kicks and we're going to defend them. So, I mean, I don't know. There's pros and cons.
I think calf kicks got big because there's so many movers in MMA, right? The first person that comes to mind that kind of did this and wasn't like, he didn't do things traditional and it wasn't the right way to do things. And you would watch them as Dominic Cruz, right? And he just retired. And He was a great fighter, but if you watched him, you'd be like, that's not how you fight. But he was like, he had to fight that way because he was fighting like up like 2 weight classes at the time, and he could not like get hit. If he got hit, it was game over. So he had to move so much,
Mhm.
right? And his advantage was cardio. He was like one of those people that could move the entire time. And then there was like a big wave of movers, right? Like TJ Dillashaw and
Mhm.
Dominic Sean O'Malley. And then people are like, how do you slow down somebody? Oh, you kick their leg, right? And well, I can't let them get too close. Oh, I can't kick above the knee. Now I have to kick below at the calf, and it's going to slow them down as well. So I think like just the way sports work is so unique. Um, and it like I don't know. I love that's my favorite thing about sports is
There's
kind of like the
also
thinking of it.
there's also fallacies within that, right? So like I was thinking about this when you're talking about football. People say in like football, defense wins championships, right? And in fighting, obviously, defense is really, really important. And I have to be careful how I word this because I don't want this to come off wrong. But like, it's not that defense isn't important, but what you have to remember is defense doesn't win you fights, right?
No.
Offense wins you fights. Defense keeps you in the fight. And like, I don't know, for me, maybe that just like sounds dumb, but like for me, that was like a really important thing to like flip in my mind. It's like, yeah, obviously defense is really important. I don't want you guys to get hurt. I don't want you guys to like not be able to speak in your 40s. But we have to remember defense does not win fights at all.
Yeah. Well, in my head when you're saying that, I was like, is that because MMA is subjective and like there's not a scoreboard, but also in football, like if you're play defense and it's 0-0 and you never score a point, you didn't win either, right? So you have to have some form of offense.
Offense is what
Yeah,
makes you win.
offenses
Like
win.
if you look at
Offense
what
wins.
scores,
Yeah.
right? Whether it's subjective like MMA, which I mean, I don't even think MMA is a real sport because of that, but whatever, that's neither here nor there. Again, semantics. But like if you look at the scoring criteria, the very first thing is effective grappling and striking,
Yeah.
right? And somewhere in the rules, it's like it specifically says that like defense isn't what scores, right? Like the reward for defense is that you didn't get hit or you didn't get taken down or you just you maintain a neutral position. It's not that that like looks good. So, you might go out there and just like Anderson Silva or Pernell Whitaker around someone and they throw a gazillion strikes and you throw none and like it looks really cool. But the guy who was on offense is winning, you
Yeah.
know? And that's just like a really important thing to keep in mind. And again, I don't want to undervalue defense, right? Because like you don't want to turn into, a Ramon Deckers who, well, I mean, some people do, or like an early Justin Gaethje. Do you know who Ramon Deckers is?
No.
Oh, dude, you gotta check out some highlights.
Kickboxer.
Yeah, he was a Thai fighter. He was one of the early like foreign fighters who like went to the stadiums and did really, really well. I forget if he was actually a champ or not, if it just like got really high ranked. But yeah, like at the prime weight classes too, he was wild. And he was just all offense, no defense, right? Which makes for great highlights, but not such a great like long career. But anyways, yeah, getting back to the defense point is like you need enough to keep you in fights and to not get hurt, but can't get away from the fact that offense wins fights.
Yeah. I think that actually brings me into kind of one of the things I want to bring up is Ilya Depora.
He went right where I was hoping.
Yeah. He's so defensively sound,
Mhm.
but that gives him his all like he's very like he doesn't have wasted movement. Is kind of what I think of him his
Mhm.
fighting as. Um, how do you guys think he's gonna do moving up? Do you think it's a smart decision? Because I personally don't at all.
It depends how the weight is for him, right? If like making weight is legitimately hard, yeah, but also some people are just
Yeah,
like dense, right?
yeah.
Like,
He's definitely a dense guy, I would imagine, just by like how he's built.
mhm,
Well, I think it doesn't look like he's going to get a title shot right away.
mhm.
I don't think he. I don't really think he
But
deserves one.
would you really vacate your belt to go up and have a contender fight against Dustin Poirier? I just
It depends on a lot of things, right? So like if I were him and I was giving up my belt, I would only do that if making the weight was a serious problem. And it's like I'm hitting diminishing returns by cutting this much weight. Like then it's like, hey, it doesn't really matter who you fight, you have to go up, right?
Mhm.
Also, maybe he, has looked at Poirier or whoever he might fight and is like, I know exactly how to beat this guy. And like this makes sense for me. And it feels internally to him like less of a risk then it like comes off to the MMA community. And also you have to remember like these guys don't have a ton of control over their careers. You know what I mean? Like obviously at the top they can turn fights down and make suggestions, but like at the end of the day, the UFC is the one who,
So let
determines
me
what
ask
they
you
do.
this. Take Islam out of 55.
Hmm.
If Islam's out of 55, what is the harder weight class in the future?
Yeah, you'd have to look at the roster.
Right?
I don't know.
Is
I
where
mean,
I'm going with it is, does he go up to 55, not fight Islam, knowing that Islam at some point is going to move up to 70, and then it creates a new opening for him there
lightweight
because
is interesting because you have like this wave of guys who are really, really good, who are like all at the end of their career and
Yeah,
on their
that's what
way
I was
out.
just thinking. They're all going to be gone soon.
And it's like, who's going to be that next wave? We don't really know exactly, and I don't know that I haven't thought about it as much as I assume Taporia has. But like, you don't become a UFC champion accidentally. So like, I imagine this is at least somewhat well thought out. And I do think he can do well at probably any weight class. That dude is a monster. I think that pound for pound, he might be the best guy in the UFC.
let's say they did throw him in there with Islam.
Mhm.
How do you see a fight like that going?
I mean, you never know, and I'm notoriously bad at, like predicting fight outcomes. But I would probably give the edge to Islam because he's
Yeah,
so skilled. His grappling is next level, and he's big.
yeah,
Like the weight classes exist
that's my
for
biggest thing
a
is
reason.
I think Topuria might be the guy to like he might be the silhouette to be Islam, but at the end of the day, I think he's too small.
Yeah,
And I think that's what it's going to come down to.
How much
I think that's what
bigger
it came down to with
with Volk?
Volk. I think if Volk was 10 pounds heavier, walked around 10 pounds heavier and was actually a bigger human, I think he would have won.
I do think that Taporia has better like power precision punching though.
Yeah,
And
that's
once
fair.
you have a certain amount of power, it doesn't, again, you cross a certain threshold where it's like, it doesn't matter who you hit, like they're gonna be hurt.
Yeah.
And like Islam's been knocked out before, we know that's not an impossibility. So you never know. That's what makes this sport exciting. It's
Hmm.
like we don't know what's going on. We don't know how big, he actually is. We don't know anything about this fight until it happens. And
I think his grappling is a little underrated. Not that,
Taporia.
yeah.
Oh, for sure.
I don't
He's a
think that
great
he's
grappler.
obviously he's not on the Islam level, but I
But
think
we
his
don't know.
grappling is better than I think it's better than Volk's.
We don't
I
know,
don't
you know?
know.
I
I don't
mean,
know. I think Volk's grappling is underrated as
I
well.
agree with that for sure. But I mean,
Um,
Taporia, I think, is a better grappler than striker, and he's an incredible striker.
Mhm.
So it's like
hmm.
we just until we see it, we have no idea how, he's going to match up against Islam
He's really
grappling
grown on
wise.
me as a fighter. I was not a fan of him, and it's like I kind of felt like, oh, you're kind of cringy trying to be like
Hmm.
McGregor. But I'm like, I don't know. I mean, the dude goes out, he shows up, he puts out
I also don't see that.
with the
The
McGregor
guy, other
comparison.
than the tattoo, like I literally don't see it. I
It's because
don't.
he's European and he wears nice clothes.
Yeah, I just like when people started to say that, I was like, what are you talking about? Maybe it's just because I don't think I knew who Ilya Taborya was until he was a champion.
Mhm.
I don't get that. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of don't see it
I
the
don't see
same
it at
way.
all.
I mean, I understand where people are coming from. I was arguing with Lonnie about this yesterday, but yeah, I don't know. I don't see him that way, but I was the same way as you. I did not like him initially. There was just something about him that I was like, yeah, I don't like this dude.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
over time, I was like, I really like his fight style at least.
Yeah.
And because that's like the first step to me liking someone. Like I hated Chael because I'm a big Anderson Silva fan. And then I was like, well, I kind of like the way he fights. And then I was like, all right, he's entertaining. I like him.
Yeah.
Um,
I would say like most of my favorite fighters I hated at first. Right. It was like, I hate this guy. He's doing too much or whatever. And then I'm like, you know what? I kind of get it. And then you're like, oh man, I really like him now.
there's
Right.
a handful of fighters that I really like that I hated initially, but all the guys who I like really, really like, all my like favorites, I like them from the beginning. The Anderson
Hmm.
Silvas, the Carlos Condits, the GSPs, you know what I mean? Like those dudes, I was like, you're awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting.
So I've got a question. I was looking at just different eras,
Hmm.
and I think you're giving me the opening to want to go here before we wrap things up. So Anderson Silva in his prime versus Pereira at 85 in his prime. I saw this one debated, and I think there's a couple of others that I was thinking about. I'm like, man, GSP
Hmm.
versus Islam. Although
Hmm.
different weight classes, I think you could argue Islam goes up, the wrestling, like maybe with let's start with Silva.
So again, that's one of those things where it's impossible to like know, obviously. I'm super biased because Anderson is my favorite fighter like ever.
Mhm.
Um, I really don't know. Um, I might have to go Silva. He's just got he's just got more tools to win. Well, also it depends what we're talking about with like 85 Pereira. We're talking about Pereira when he was at 85, like or like Pereira
Yes.
now but making 85. Like I think that Anderson probably has better jujitsu, but I mean also it's hard to say that too because like the eras are so different. You know what I mean? So it's like
Mhm.
being good at jujitsu in the 2000s, 2010s is different from being good at jujitsu now. It's really, really hard to say. I'm gonna go with Anderson, but I don't have any great like reasoning for it. It's just because I like
Your question
him.
was Anderson Silva versus Alex Pereira.
Yeah.
I
In
think,
their prime, or
and then
even or Anderson in his prime at 85 versus Izzy in his prime at 85.
so that my argument was I think Izzy and Pereira obviously aren't identical, but I think they're very similar. So I really think it's like that's very like they
I
fight
take
10 times, it's
Anderson.
5-5.
I think
I would take Anderson over them. And this is one of the ones.
he has to grapple though.
I
I,
wouldn't I wouldn't because it's I think that it's further along. Like I don't think Anderson 2010 is as good as Izzy in 2020 just because it's 10 years removed. I feel like Izzy let's say he's a blue belt and Anderson's a purple belt. Like I feel like Izzy's blue belt just is more.
okay, but hold on. Here's why that's not the case. Izzy in his prime wasn't in his jujitsu prime, right? Jujitsu is one of those
Yeah.
things that you kind of get better at, like almost indefinitely until your body falls apart
Yeah.
completely, right? And like Izzy had good jujitsu for being whatever he was, a blue belt, purple belt. Anderson was a black belt. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
like different eras for sure, but like I do think that Anderson was a better
Yeah,
grappler
I agree.
in his prime
I
than Izzy
do
in his prime.
agree. I don't know. I
Oh,
don't
that's the point I was
know.
making earlier is Izzy in his prime didn't have his best jujitsu. You know
No,
what I mean? So like if Anderson was able to take him
that's
down,
true.
he might pose some serious problems. I mean, dude, he tapped Travis Lutter off his
Mhm.
back. He choked out Dan Henderson.
Can't
Like,
or Chael Sonnen with
yeah, exactly, dude.
losing.
Like
It's
Anderson could
wild.
slap on submissions. Anderson has that it factor. Like I was talking
He
about with you,
does.
Anderson could lose all those rounds. I'm still gonna believe that he's gonna win. I've seen it happen before. Like
Mhm.
yeah, I'm going Anderson now.
Okay. GSP and Islam or GSP and Khabib.
Oh man,
Oh
that's
man, that
hard.
one's
I'm kind of
good.
throwing 1 versus 2 in both of these scenarios,
It's
but
like, oh, that's so hard because, oh man, that's
That one's crazy to me.
GSP's MMA wrestling is unbelievably good, but his wrestling isn't going to be as good as Khabib. So it's like if they get into those exchanges, what's going on? But I would say that George is like whatever we want to call like pure jujitsu, even though that's like again an oversimplification, probably better, but like it maybe more complex is the right word. I think he's better at a lot of different things, whereas Khabib is freakishly good at the right things for that sport. I really don't know.
I think that that ends up coming down to like, all right, if you have two really good people that are really good at offense, like we were talking about, what matters is where they are good at defense. So I think it would come down to who's better at defending takedowns and a lot of times you see two really good wrestlers fight each other, they don't shoot.
Right.
Right? I don't know, but I would think it's going to come down to GSP being a better striker than Habib, in my opinion. So I think GSP would beat Habib but lose to Islam.
It's so hard I don't know. I really don't know. And also, I mean, again, my personal biases coming into it are like,
mhm.
I've been a huge fan of GSP for a really long time. And I really like him. Like, I like his fighting style and I like who he is as a dude. That's
Yeah,
like
me
kind of
too.
rare in MMA.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
and I've been a fan of Khabib, not as long, but I also think he's a good dude. Like, I like him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, like, I don't know. This is a hard one for me. And I'm super biased. And again, like I said, I'm not good at picking who wins fights because I'm very biased. So like
I love the
don't know.
fantasy matchup thing
No, it's super fun.
from like generations. I think
Okay.
that's
And there's some that I have
nice.
very strong opinions on, so like it depends.
Khabib versus Islam.
Khabib.
Obviously, they would never fight.
Right, I'm gonna go Khabib.
You think Khabib's the better version?
I do.
I think Islam.
Interesting.
I think Islam because I don't know.
He's
Well, I
got-
bet I do. Do we have the dynamics of who they are?
Well, that's what I was gonna say. Is the big brother contract.
Yeah, that's what I was
mean?
gonna get at, right? Do we have the dynamics of who they are? Because I don't think Islam would ever beat Khabib
Exactly.
because of that. But if we like had just like their skill levels,
Separate the two out. They're not
then-
related. It's just like Islam is a fighter versus Khabib is a fighter.
I'm still gonna go
I love it,
Khabib.
man.
I think
don't
Khabib's
know.
more
I don't
durable.
know.
I think he's like, I think he has a little bit, and this is like so hard to say, but I think he has a little bit more of that like championship drive that they both clearly have like massive amounts of.
You know,
But
I
again,
don't know about that.
don't know.
I don't know if he does. I don't know. Islam's shown a lot in his championship drive, and Habib, as tough as Habib was, he did show some like what I would call like mental lapses, where like he missed weight a couple times and stuff like that. I don't know about Islam.
I think
but
for him, I don't think that was a mental lapse. I think that's a physical lapse. I don't
he
think,
think he's cut too much weight.
yeah, dude. I don't think
Yeah.
that, I don't think you can do
He's
anything
a
that's
beefy
gonna like
boy.
make him mentally break, especially not weight cutting. I just don't see that happening with him.
Huh. Yeah, I don't know. That one's crazy.
Yeah, these ones are too close.
I'm trying to
you know?
think of one that would like be a like
Give
the
us
lower.
different
I'm trying to think
example.
the lower weight classes.
Well, this isn't a lower weight class, but this is one that I think is like maybe we'll have different opinions on. Prime Rampage or Prime Jiri?
Rampage.
I agree.
I think Rampage. I think Rampage is better wrestling than college wrestling.
Isn't it crazy that we've taken the old head as opposed to the newer guy?
I don't
even
know.
though we've
Damn near
thought-
Well,
everyone.
there's not a lot of weight classes where that happens, but if you look
Yeah.
at early heavyweights and light heavyweights, like in the Pride era and early UFC, I think they're better than they are now. You know what I mean? If like who's
Yeah.
who's a good heavyweight? It's like John Jones, Tom Aspinall. Then you've got a handful of guys who are like
Yeah,
they're pretty
peers that
good.
got
You know what I
those
mean?
things.
Like the Volkovs, the Cursed Blades, whatever. And then you got a bunch of dudes who just like, no offense to them, but like they're just not that skilled. If you look at like the heavyweights in Pride, right? You've got the Nogueiras, right? Great at jiu-jitsu for the era. Maybe that's not going to translate as well across eras, whatever, but like super skilled. You have the Crow Cops, you have Fedor, you have Kevin Randleman,
Kane.
you have, I mean, yeah, that's just past that era kind of, but like, yeah, you have Kane.
He's like, yeah, I guess he does kind of border.
I think
that.
like right as soon as Pride ended. But
Yeah.
yeah, Kane, I think beats most of the heavyweights now. And I don't think that's the case in the lower weight classes. I think if you look at
Yeah, I
like,
think that's one thing I was like, if you put Dominic Cruz against Sean O'Malley, I think Sean O'Malley kills him.
I mean, Dominic
Or
Cruz is
somebody
kind of
like
an
Dominic Cruz, he's
outlier,
kind of an
actually,
anomaly
because
because he's so like
he's so good.
he would be so hard to like.
Take Miguel Torres and have him fight any
Yeah.
of like the modern guys. And like, I think he's getting smashed,
My I just got on this big wave. Do you guys know about this guy, Alex Pantoja? He's very good. I just found out about him recently. I think him and DJ would have been a banger. And I think he might have beat him. I really do.
See,
He's
this
a
is what we can
dog.
disagree on,
I
dude.
just
I
found
think-
out about him, so maybe I'm just on a new kick. But he's
Dude.
pretty good.
DJ is one of like the greatest pound for pound all time.
I agree.
I think
I think Pantoja's resume is starting to be that of DJ's. It's starting to get there.
yeah, but also I don't know, man. I think DJ just has too many ways to win. And like you said, you describe Pantoja as being a dog. That's great. That's a prereq to being a good fighter. But DJ's got the skills.
I think he's got like he's very good all around. I think that's my
He is. I mean, dude, he's awesome. And
Yeah, he's
could
so
obviously be
good.
wrong, but like, dude, Demetrius was special. He was just
yeah, he
different.
was, man.
you
He
know?
was
Like,
good.
there's certain guys you watch fight, like an Anderson Silva, a John Jones, where you're like, that guy's different. Amongst this group of 1% different people, he is different within that cohort. And it's like, that's just, I don't know. I don't know.
So, what about Prime Chuck versus Jiri?
Chuck
going
over-
Chuck.
Yeah, I'm going Chuck.
Yeah.
Going Chuck?
Jiri
Picking
is
Chuck over most people.
Jiri gets good
Chuck.
results despite his skill set, not because of it. And I really like him like as a dude, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
I don't love his fighting style. I mean, I like watching it, but like, dude, that's kind of different from like liking someone's style.
First
But
year he's wild.
I like who he is, Whereas Chuck, I think his style is just like relatively basic but sharp,
Dude, you know what fight I would have killed for if we could do this fantasy matchup back in the day is Jamal Hill versus Rampage. I think that just all the buildup would have been just a blast.
I mean, that would have been cool.
It would have been a
But in
blast.
terms of the actual fight, I think maybe I was talking about this with Mike, but the fight that I truly think is like one of the best ones that never happened is Prime DC and Prime Fedor. That one, I'm like, I don't know, man. That's nuts. Apparently, Fedor just got signed to bare knuckle.
Yeah, I saw that.
Holy shit.
Not fired up about that.
What about Prime Fedor versus John Jones?
John Jones.
I gotta go, John.
I don't think John
Yeah.
Jones. I don't think John Jones.
I think Prime John beats everyone.
Yeah, Prime
Think,
John.
do you think if we see so last question,
Tom and John.
do
Is
we
that what
do
it
you
is?
think we see Tom and John
I
fight?
do think we see it.
And what do you think happens?
I'm slightly leaning Aspinall, but like
Oof.
obviously
Just
John
because
can
of
win that.
age?
Age
That's what
and
it is.
it's like Tom's a natural heavyweight and he's fast for a heavyweight. John, like he's not a natural heavyweight, and at this age, he's not super fast. Like I remember, and maybe it's just like me because I say this about like almost everyone, but they'll like post videos of people like hitting pads, and they're like, "He looks so fast." And I'm like, "No, he doesn't." Like when Tyson fought Jake Paul, people are looking at him on pads, and I'm like reading Instagram comments. They're like, "How could he ever lose? Like
That's
he's
crazy
so
because I thought
fast."
the same thing. I was like, he just looks like a worse version of old Tyson.
Yeah, I'm like, he looks really slow. Like maybe
Yeah.
just people don't know what they're looking at. And like after that fight, people would post videos and they're like, that must have been a rigged fight. Look at how good he looks. And I'm like, no, like he doesn't look that good. Look at him when he was 15. He was freakishly fast.
Yeah, and like the timing on that's different, right? So if
Mhm.
you're fighting with the same exact style, but you're slower, it's
Yup.
gonna fuck you,
Yes.
right? You almost have to adjust.
And that's why John is able to have success being slower because
He's
he
he's
has
changed
it.
it.
His
Yeah,
fight
because
IQ
he's changed.
Mhm.
John has the best fight IQ ever,
ever of all
ever,
time.
and that is why I picked John.
I think there's just so definitely fight IQ. I think they go into that fight.
Ah, damn
I
it.
think they
Hey,
go into
man,
that
Destined
fight.
to happen.
It was going to happen.
I've been
Um,
waiting on it.
I think they go into that fight. Tom Aspinall has a lot more pressure in his mind than John has on him, and that might not be what's actually
Ooh, I don't
from the
know about
outside. I think John Jones, there's something in that man's mind where I think I don't know that he feels that type. I feel like he's just made for that type of shit, man. There's something about him where he's just like,
He is, but also think about this fight specifically. John is objectively the GOAT, right? Sorry, Max, he is. But Tom Aspinall, he could lose this fight, and there's like very little, like his stock doesn't go down, right? Like it's just like, oh yeah, you lost to the GOAT, of course. And then John will go and retire, and then Tom Aspinall could go on and
That's
become
why
one
I
of the
think they
great
should
heavyweights.
fight because I think they're almost not fighting because of the stakes at hand, but like
Mhm.
fuck that, do it.
yeah.
I don't think either one has much to lose. You could argue the opposite. You could say they both have.
I think on the
think-
surface it
I don't.
seems like
I don't
that.
think either one has a ton to lose.
I think John does, dude. Like, I mean, his legacy is cemented, but one thing
I
that's
think
cool
the
about John is
only
he's
thing,
undefeated.
yeah, I think that's the only thing.
know?
It's like if he ends on a loss, but I think that would be so poetic because that is MMA, right? At the end of the day, Father Time catches up to all of us. Even if you're the GOAT, you're gonna lose. And if he retired on a loss, that's
I don't
fucking
think John
awesome.
thinks there's a chance in hell that he would lose, which is why I don't think that he would be nervous about his legacy.
I think he thinks. Oh, I
I
disagree.
think-
I disagree. I think
Yeah.
I see him and he
I think
reminds me of, and this is so stupid and anecdotal, but John Jones reminds me of a really, really close friend of mine, personality wise. This kid would give the shirt off his back when he's around like my parents or family. Like he's like so like nice, outgoing. He'd barbecue for you on the grill, but you take him out. He's the kind of dude that would like take somebody's face and beat it off of a brick. He's a sociopath.
Mhm.
I think John is a little bit of a sociopath. And I think that in a fight situation, he's like, like when you see him telling DC, like, no, I'd fucking kill you. I actually think that he was being honest about that.
I agree, but those are different things,
I
right? So like,
agree, but I also don't think we could say he has a high fight IQ and not be able to say
Fair.
that his
Okay.
he can see Tom's path to victory.
Yeah.
He's aware of what's going on. With that said, that is a special thing about John. And there's an old interview where someone asked him, they go, John, do you think that you're a good guy who does bad things
I
or a
love
bad
this.
guy
I
who does
love
good
this.
things? And he goes, oh, that's a good question. He thinks about it for a second. And he goes, and like John's not dumb. And he thinks about it for a second. And he goes, I think I'm a bad guy who does good things or like tries to do good things or something. And like I believe him,
Oh,
you
so
know?
do I.
I
I
love that.
think
That's
that
my favorite
He's a
fucking
wild, wild man.
thought.
I think in order to be a good fighter, you need, and there's degrees of it, but there's a part of you that has to enjoy hurting people, right? Like you have to have that. That's one of the reasons I don't fight anymore is that part of me started to, diminish greatly. And some people don't have it at all. Some people have too much of it. But I think that desire or that sociopathy or however we want to define that, I think that's separate from what Lucas is saying. It's
It's a
that
good
fight
point
IQ
that you make. Yeah.
because it's like I could believe like I could have the willingness to inflict serious damage on someone, but if I don't have the skills, it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Like if I went and fought John Jones, it does not matter how confident I am. It doesn't matter how much I'm willing to hurt him. He's going to beat me 100 out of 100 times. I just don't have the the skills or the physical abilities to make that happen. So I think that he looks at Tom and sees everything that we see and realizes he's dangerous. He hits hard, he's fast, he's a good grappler, he is athletic unlike the rest of the heavyweights, and he sees the problems there.
I also think what makes John special, and kind of when he had like this lapse where he was like not he was winning like decisions, was he didn't feel threatened by those opponents, right? When he was on the come up, he was trying to prove himself, and I think that he would feel threatened by. I feel like he would feel threatened by Tom.
Yes.
And I think Stipe he even felt threatened by. I watched Embedded. He's watching film on Stipe, and he's giving Stipe his flowers. He's like, dude, he's very good here. He's good here, and which is crazy. Which was crazy. Well, he did a little bit kind of shit on him, but in the Embedded video, he's kind of like he was kind of giving him like a little bit, and he was like, this dude's good.
Do you think he was trying to sell the fight?
I think that was selling the fight
You think so?
and being respectful to Stipe. I think John knew he was going to crush Stipe. Did Stipe? Love Stipe. I like who he is as a dude. I like who he is as a fighter, right? Again, that's a rare thing. All props to Stipe. Anyone who knows anything about fighting knew that Jones was going to murder him, right? Like again, me who very often incorrectly predicts fights, I knew with 100% certainty that Stipe was going to get smashed. He had the ring rust. He has the age. He's just too, I mean, dude, he was way slower than Jones. And Jones at heavyweight is slow compared to Jones, in his prime. And yeah, man, it's Stipe's game again, high quality, but kind of, I don't want to say limited, but basic, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas Jones' game is high quality and very complex. He can do everything at a super high level, and that's rare. That's really rare.
Yeah.
He just had too many paths to victory. He's too smart. He was more athletic than Stipe at the time. Yeah, I think he knew he was going to crush Stipe.
See,
I don't think that's the case with Tom.
I think Tom's but we've seen a lot of guys who have a lot of characteristics. I don't put as much stock into who he's beaten to this point. Like after the Rosenstrike fight, I don't look at Pavlovich as like, oh my God, the boogeyman. Everybody was afraid of Pavlovich. Dude's he'll never be a champion in the UFC. Pavlovich is a good fighter at heavyweight, punches hard, above average. I look at that now and I'm like, that's not as huge of a win for me for Tom.
Here's the thing about Pavlovich. Take out Tom and John, Pavlovich could be a champ. He could knock out any of those dudes, right? I would put him in that like category of heavyweights.
He's the same to me as a Curtis Blades.
Yeah, or a Volkov. Like they're all interchangeable. They could all beat each other on any given night, and they're in that little group of guys.
They're never going to be champ.
But they'll never be champ if Tom and John are around. But John's not going to be around forever. Tom can be heavyweight champ for the next 10 years if he chooses to. I think he is way better. I saw Tom's first fight in the UFC, and I was like, oh my God, this dude is awesome. I made a breakdown about it on Instagram.
Yeah, I remember. You've always been on the Tom Aspinall train.
I'm telling you guys, this is a heavyweight who doesn't suck. And he's physically gifted. That's unbelievable. Like that's so rare, I mean, yeah, you take him, go back in the eras, you know what I mean? Prime Tom against prime Fedor. I might go Tom, like he transcends eras. He's the real deal. He's super good.
Yeah, he reminds me of a level or two above like a Frank Mir.
Like 10 levels above Frank. No offense to Frank Mir, but yeah, 10 levels
but
above
very
Frank
similar fighting style, I feel like.
I think they just have like a similar physique.
In some ways, I think that I think Tom's more willing to take it wherever he has an
Okay, fair.
advantage.
Tom's
Then-
tattoos are cooler too, so
Yeah.
that plays a factor.
I'm just a big Frank Mir fan.
I like Frank
I
Mir.
love that.
I do like
I
Frank
love
Mir.
him so much, especially now in his post career. Like some of his little
Dude, his
anecdotes that he
daughter's
talks
so
about.
good.
Yeah.
She's gonna be a world champ.
UFC 314. I threw out a text. What do you guys think?
That's a nutty card.
What
Fight
is it, April
companion?
12th?
Yeah. April
Yeah, well,
12th.
I
It'll be
mean-
post. You'll be post victory.
I will be post victory, hoping to do a quick turnaround. I could have a couple beers on April 12th. We'll figure it out. Yeah, we'll just see what everybody's up to. I'm definitely on board with it, even if it's just the two of us, maybe just Will, maybe just Mike. We'll see. Whatever
Volkanovski and
schedules line up.
Lopez, Patty and Chandler.
That shit's crazy.
That is nuts.
That's a big card, man.
Those are fights too where I'm like, I couldn't tell
Dude.
you who's gonna win.
Patty Chandler's wild.
Patty's gonna take it.
Yeah, I think so too.
Patty's gonna take it.
I think so too.
I hope so. I like you.
I kinda
just
like Patty.
Chandler.
Like, yeah, he'll wait around. Like, hey, can I talk on the microphone?
Yeah.
Just like, hey, go.
He's like, let me give you an inspirational speech about how like hard I work. And it's, all right, dude.
Krylov and
Like-
Reyes. Interesting fight.
I don't know.
Darren Elkins and Arosa.
Man, Darren Elkins, that dude's like 40 or something.
Jim Miller and Chase Hooper. I didn't know they were fighting.
That's interesting
That's
to
weird.
me. Nah, that's
That's
cool.
weird. That's a
I
hard
think
matchup.
Jim Miller picks up another victory, man.
That's an odd matchup.
I wouldn't be surprised if he does. Like, that's a good matchup for him.
Yes,
That is a
right?
good matchup for him.
It's just a wild matchup to me.
Yes.
Like those are two people I would have never envisioned playing.
I think that makes sense. I think they're kind of using Jim Miller
Yeah.
properly as the gatekeeper for these up and comers, but like he's not. I don't see Chase as being like so dangerous that it's like almost irresponsible to have him fight. Also, Jim Miller's not one of those dudes who's like really declined at the end of his career. He's like maintained.
He's
his
looked
skills.
good his last couple
He's
of
looked
fights.
awesome. You know what I mean? He's not like it's not like they're taking Tony Ferguson and having him fight some dude who's just like a crazy, 12-0 knockout machine, So
Michael
like,
Chandler.
Yeah. Well, dude, Tony was giving Michael Chandler the work at the beginning, so I think Patty might win, but I don't know.
Didn't
I
Patty
don't
fight
really care.
Ferguson in one of Tony's last fights?
did he?
Or no, he fought,
He fought
Bobby Green.
Yeah.
He
That-
totally
He
could
put
have.
Bobby Green out. I didn't think that was going to happen.
That shit was crazy.
Yeah,
That was
I
a great.
thought
That's
Bobby
why I
Green was
think
actually going to
his
win that
jiu-jitsu
fight.
Me too,
His
yeah.
jiu-jitsu is good.
Jeff
Patty
Neal and
surprised
Carlos
me.
Paredes.
That I love, dude.
It's a good
Carlos
fight.
Prates, that dude is a beast.
Don't know.
You do. If I showed you the highlights, you'd know him.
Mhm.
Well, Brody and I have a code for him. I'll show you. I'll
Okay.
show you something later. But he's super legit. His striking is
It's a big
awesome.
fucking card, man.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, we should definitely work on maybe watching that together
Yeah,
in the basement.
I'll be back.
In the basement.
Thanks for doing this.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was awesome.
I got lost in the like letting you kind of talk about the way you look at fighting, and I mean, it really emphasizes the level of coaching that
I
you bring.
could ramble on forever on how I view fighting and coaching and various martial arts philosophies and stuff, but that would get boring. So
You still play the drums? Kelly?
occasionally, I got them set up at my house now. I have
Yeah.
like a cool little room that I could, set up my old drum set in. So occasionally I'll get down there and bang around, but not as much. I'm busy,
I'm
unfortunately.
supposed to go bang around at some point,
I promised him that in like half an hour, I could get him playing drums better than he could imagine.
which is crazy because I've never played a musical instrument in my life.
You've hit people. Same thing.
Yeah.
I've done that.
Mhm.
And I'm doing it March 15th. Buy your tickets.